All right, so, excuse me. So I wanted to talk about the sexual 8 and the sexual subtypes and the sexual 6 and how people can tell the difference between them. And I think that, some people might ask me, so maybe they can both be possessive and they both are addicted to relationships and they're both sexual subtypes. How do you tell the difference between the sexual 8, sexual 6, sexual 4? All of these people, sexual 2, they can all be possessive. They can all be, addicted to love and relationships and sex. And so I thought it would be nice to parse some of the differences, starting with just defining the sexual 8, because this is one that I'm more familiar with, being one myself. So with the sexual 8, you're looking at really a full lifetime commitment with the person often. And they say it's a to the death pact with the person. And that, for the sexual 8, is where the vulnerability comes in, because I know that I'm not going to break the pact. That's something I want and I can fulfill. And I can tell you, personally, I have only had a few relationships, and I kept my end of the pact in all of them. But the other person then has to keep up their end. You can't control somebody completely. So you have to trust them. And, once you've trusted them, there is this feeling of possessing them, and you can feel when they're in your possession and when you have their attention. And there tends to be they're simply more sexual in many ways than, say, the sexual 6 or the sexual 4. If you compare, think about it in terms of the triads they're in. The sexual 6, they're head types, and they are not as lustful. The 8 is a physical type. Sex as an addiction in the relationship paired with love and, commitment and all of the other, values and behaviors that go along with that are all very much, sort of nested within being a sexual 8, because that's the physical space where sex plays out in the body. With the sexual 6, you can find them with less focus on sexuality. That's one reason why they become counterphobic, daredevil types of people. They don't necessarily have as much of an obsession with relationships. I mentioned in a previous post about in a sexless world, in a sexless fantasy world, the sexual 8s show their lust for sex in power and domination as rulers and bosses and taking control in a big way, as 8s do, such as these characters in The Lord of the Rings, or Sauron or Darth Vader. They're not in relationships because relationships don't exist for them for whatever reason in that world, but they still play out that lust for power. And it's much different from the sexual 6. The sexual 6s, they have much more mastery over themselves in some ways. The 8s, it's paradoxical and a little bit counterintuitive to explain, but the 8s, their task is to master themselves. That's really what they need to do. They don't have much of an issue controlling other people. They will tell you exactly what you need to hear and what you need to do, and they're happy to do it. But they don't know how to hold themselves back. They don't know how to control themselves. They lack discipline. They become addicted to power. They become impulsive, lustful types of people. So you find them disintegrating into those kinds of positions, into relationships where they're dominating, or into life situations where they're dominating other people and pushing the physical world to its limits through the body, through the senses, through lust, through this big, takeover of the physical domain in this life as a sensate, concrete entity. The sexual six, on the other hand, is more abstract. They have many more issues with questions about knowledge and trust and belief and faith. They test more in relationships. They test the person to see if the person can be trusted. They operate more from a base level of distrust more often. The eights can have that. They can become paranoid. They can, be worried the person is going to screw them or whatever, but it comes from a different place. And I would say it's toned down compared to the sexual six, which is more of a tester, and they're more ambivalent, and their relationship is more of a constant process of figuring out if this is going to be a to the death pact or not. With the sexual eights, that pact happens, and it's then assumed, and then they kind of take over, or they surrender the power, and then they enjoy the fusion of that life together that they can then build on and become closer and more merged with the person. Sexual six, they struggle more with distrust and trying to figure out what's really going on in their lives and whether this is going to work out, and there's more uneasiness. I think that the sexual six, you can get there through marriage and other means, but they have a different attitude. They're the ones that trust in the marriage tend to be more conservative. The sixes often fall into these complicated dynamics. They can be very conservative, they can be more free, and there's always some element there of struggling with faith and then overcompensating by being too dogmatic, too conservative, or, struggling with faith and becoming sort of chronic rebels and people that can't seem to settle down and sort of can't commit. They never really can trust the relationship. They never can settle down with the person because they don't trust it. So they kind of fall on those two sides more, because that's what helps them to feel a form of settlement. Whereas the eight's very different. It's in the physical space. And the sexual eight is the most physically, lustfully aggressive type as far as the sexual act goes, and relationships, physical, sexual, literal, romantic relationships that are exclusive, and love relationships. I think that the sexual two, they are much more of your classic romantic, coming on strong. I think the sexual eight and the sexual two can sort of meet each other. They'll have some differences. The sexual two is more emotional and so forth. But those two, even the sexual eight, can be a classic romantic, but it's in a bigger, more lustful way with autonomy issues and possessiveness of a different kind.